time to get this party started. Footy, footy, it's time to get this party started. With Danny, Jimmy, Gregor, Andy, Drink, and JC. All we know and all we talk about is footy, footy. It's time to get this party started tonight.
Here's a hot take for your football fans. Modern footballers make too much money and have too much luxury at their disposal that they lose the desire to work hard and push themselves. Agree? Disagree? Let us know. That is what we shall discuss today with Craig Forrest, Amy Walsh, Jimmy Brennan, and Dan Wong. I'm James Sharman. So there's the hot take to start things off today. They make too much money. They lose, I guess, that hunger, that desire. Craig, is that an unfair blanket statement, or is it very, very apt in modern football?
No, I think that's a little bit unfair to blanket everybody like that. I think it comes down to character. And when you look at the top teams in the world, top club teams in the world, those players are being able to handle the pressures day in, day out, and bring that quality to their game all the time. That's a big part of it. Do they make too much money? It's a short career. Who else is going to get the money? They create an awful lot of money, but everybody wants to add more games. And this is a bit of a problem, I think, from a quality standpoint, that the quality on the pitch is going to sometimes be affected by the amount of games that they play. Expansion of the Europa League, expansion of Champions League, the Club World Cup, the World Cup going to 48 teams, the amount of international breaks. There's a lot of pressure on these players, for sure, but the best ones can handle it.
Dubs, is there a correlation there between how much money players are demanding and the number of games that clubs or leagues and confederations are insisting their players play?
I don't think so. I think the argument could be made for that, to say that the reason why the players' salaries have ballooned is the reason why the games are up, like that there's a direct correlation with that. But I think that when you look at member associations, you look at FIFA, you look at the confederations, you look at leagues and how rich they are and how individual clubs are, I think that there's a disparity there. Like, even if you look at the ridiculous salaries that the top players are being paid, I don't think you can justify those salaries by saying we need to squeeze in 85 games in a calendar year. I don't think that's the right move. And I don't think that's what you want to do or what you need to do for the sustainability of the game. But I want to go back to kind of the earlier argument about the players and a lack of professionalism, that they're paid all this money, and it's kind of their right to kind of not put out the right performances, the best performances week in and week out. Like, I think you go back to Forrest a couple pods ago talking about, players in the late 90s or in the 80s and going out to pubs, but then they always turned up and they gave it their best. Then the next day you could always rely upon them to do that. So regardless of the era you're playing in, regardless of the amount of wages you're being paid, I think Forrest's argument that it's about their character and it's about the personality, is about the individual. I think that's what you need to look at, because regardless of the amount of money that you're being paid, there are certain players who are going to hold themselves to a high standard, regardless of what it is they're making on a weekly basis.
Do you think there could be an argument as well with the players saying, okay, I've signed my contract, I've signed a 3-year deal. These are my expectations. I'm going to play this amount of games. I've got these tournaments that I'm playing in. And then the following season, FIFA or certain leagues come out and say, by the way, you're going to play an extra 10, 15 games. Well, that's not my contract. And I'm not getting paid for those extra games, but you're going to generate more money from those games.
It's a tough argument, isn't it, though, when you're looking at the amount of money that these guys are making? What's Holland making? 51 million euros a year?
Yeah, and I bet there's someone who turns his notifications off.
So how much is about the product on the field, right? So you want the best players to be at these big tournaments, whether international tournaments or Champions League or Europa League or whatever, Conference League, whatever you're talking about. So it's in the league's best interest to make sure those players are available. So if you want to maximize and extract that talent, you don't want to get to a point where you're losing these players to injury or you're losing, they're only playing. Some players are talking about, listen, I'm not going to give 100% in all of these games because I'm looking at what the next couple of months look like. And I can't do it. I can't give 100% every match, because not even talking about fitness, not even talking about injury, but just playing 3 games a week over 9 months or more than that, over 12 months, whatever it is now, is just impossible to do. So if it's yes, they want to crank up and they want to get the most money possible. If you're a league, you're a club, you're FIFA. But it has to come down to a point now where, in order to get the best possible quality for your broadcast, for the game, for the fans in stadium, they have to decrease the amount of games. They have to.
And then to play devil's advocate there, then you've got like the Nations League that is creating amount of games that is good for the smaller countries, which is also a good benefit for the game, I think. But certainly the amount of games are incredible. And an example, I think, Wonger, you could be able to talk to this. The NBA, they play 82 games. The pace of the games in the NBA, especially the dance of the first 3 quarters, is a different pace than you see in the playoffs, because they cannot maintain that. We talked to Alex McKechnie of the Raptors about this. They cannot maintain a high tempo through 82 games. It's just impossible.
Well, and it's funny because one of our first interviews with Alex was, and we've had him on twice, but the first one, he said the travel and the sleep. Our question was, if you had to study one thing about athletes, and he said it's basically the travel and the sleep. And as these, you keep thinking of Nations League, all these new cups, there's more travel, there's more sleep, and it's showing. I mean, the amount of these first round matches that we watched for Champions League that were utter shite. Like these guys just came off from playing league games in the Prem. They all zip over to see that they're all their mates from their home national team, or their championship team or whatever. And you're sitting there going, oh, this is really bad. This is just not good football anymore. Half the players aren't on anymore. And it's interesting to me that it can be, as Dubs always says, or I think Diana Matheson, it can be 2 things at the same time too. Obviously there's athletes who are overpaid. I remember Dickie always talking, like he had a new guy every week. Oh, that guy's on 75,000 pounds a day. He'd always talk about 1 or 2 players who were overpaid. But the owners and the opportunity to make money and the franchise values have just skyrocketed, right? Sports is the next place. But I always, I don't want to get mad at players. It's hard to be a player. Like Craig says, there's only a certain amount of time you have to be a professional and make money.
Yeah, but how much do you need?
Yeah, but I don't think you can put on the players and say, oh, they make too much money. At the end of the day, they're entertainers. And if Jim Carrey makes a movie, he makes $200 million. Nobody says anything, really, do they? He's entertainment. People pay to watch these players. It's a global game. There's a lot of money invested for companies to televise these games or stream them. And those players deserve it because people are tuning in to watch them.
It's supply and demand, right? And listen, we criticize the top end, the high end. That's a tiny percentage of footballers too. Only 180 of the 1.5 million players in organized English youth football will make it to the Premier League as professionals. Most professional footballers don't make 80 grand a week, 100 grand a week, right? It's a tiny, and those guys are selling shirts and they're selling international TV rights because of those players. With respect to the guy playing in League One, I'm not paying Fubo, wherever it is per year, to watch the Premier League because of that guy. I'm paying it because of Kevin De Bruyne at the top end. So he should get that. But I think also the criticism it's interesting points you make there about the load that these athletes bear as well physically, because they are 2 very different things. And usually we criticize older players who don't seem to be giving it all but are making all the money. It's not the young guys who are breaking through, who are still making great money. Lorenzo Insigne is the poster boy for this right now, isn't he? right? And I don't want to bash Lorenzo again. We keep doing that. But, I mean, he is a guy approaching his mid-30s, and people are saying, well, he makes too much money. He doesn't care anymore. Maybe it is just a fact that he's broken, and he can't play at that level anymore. He can't put in 90 minutes. I don't know. We don't know. We can presume, right? But it could be that after playing 15 years of professional career, he has nothing more in the tank. And who would say to an owner, nah, I won't sign that contract. I think maybe this time next year, my knee might be a little bit swollen.
Yeah, but Sean,
my calf will be tight.
Does that go back to your initial question where they're making too much money? Does a player like Insigne become comfortable? He doesn't have to push himself. If he wasn't making that money and he's still trying to push for another contract, is he pushing through these little niggles that he picks up? I think so.
You mean he's not going to get another 15 million next time? Yeah, I think there's a point of some people are mailing it in when they get to a certain stage, and that's a big risk when you're signing these players. You have to know them inside and out. That look at a guy like Ronaldo. I mean, this guy is completely different than everybody else, where he doesn't matter what league he is in, he wants to score and perform and be the best of the best every single game. Yeah. You're not seeing that from Insigne.
No, and that goes back to your initial point, Craig, was about character. And I think when you do go after these players and you're going to play money, it's all about the character. Are they willing to sacrifice and push themselves?
One of the things I think with the Champions League, I personally I've seen, and with the expansion of it, it's lost a little bit of the importance of what these games mean in the knockout. Like if you're in groups of 4, these games are important, but we don't even know really what the points tally needs to be to get out of the groups with these new setups. And is there a case of fan burnout? There's too many games, too many competitions, too many. Like, look at the Canadian Championship the other night in Vancouver. I would think that would have been a fantastic game for fans to go get behind. And yet, if you had an American team in the mix, they'd probably fill the place. But Canadian Championship, it doesn't. There's again competitions, more of them, and you're asking the fans to dip into their pockets over and over again as well.
Well, we didn't even, I asked at the beginning of that show that when we were covering it about the Columbus Crew and Club America, right? We're playing in the Campeones of something. So the 2 league champions were playing each other. And everyone said, I didn't even know that was going on. Like to your point, Craig, I feel like the NHL made a big mistake signing just with Rogers. They turned hockey into wallpaper. It used to be event viewing, and it's almost, they're doing it to soccer. They're doing it to football, your beloved sport, my new beloved sport. They're really turning it into a place where you're missing games if you have a life, and we all have a life, right? But literally, hey, what are you competing with? I'm competing with my kids. I drove an hour to watch senior basketball in Markham last night.
Seniors basketball or senior basketball?
Yeah, it was senior girls basketball, high school basketball. But my point is,
like dunking over
you're in arenas, Charms. Dubs is in arenas. Jimmy's in gyms. Craig's in front of the TV, and he can't even watch everything, right? Like, is there too much? And that would go like, that kind of watered down waterfall happens to everything, and then you don't get as much passion. You don't get, this is the problem with turning things into wallpaper.
Yeah, everything's being distilled down, right?
That's right.
The Champions League, into Forrest's point, like I'm not saying it's lost its allure, because there's something about the Champions League with that song. It gives you goosebumps every time. The branding that's associated with it is distinct and it's unique. But even that is getting watered down. And and to your point, Wonger, about all of us, like I love to watch football, and the fact that it's moved off traditional linear media and broadcast means that there's an accessibility to the sport and to the game that there never has been before. And yet it's almost too much. So how do you make things distinctive and unique and stand out? Well, you make sure that your top players are involved. So if again, I think it points back to the sustainability of the game. You need these top players. I'm not going to argue that they shouldn't be paid what they're being paid, but you get them to play so many games, then these games lose meaning. And then when you want them playing when the games really do matter in World Cup finals and Champions League finals, etc., I think you can only probably fill in like on one hand, like 3 other events, whether it's the women's game or the men's game. You want your top players to be competing in those moments so that people are tuning in. But it's being lost in the narrative of just this continuous cycle of match after match after match. So again, everything is going to crumble and break down. So we've reached a tipping point where there's an oversaturation of everything. So you have to kind of step back from it and zoom in on what's important for all the stakeholders of the game and your assets, which are the players.
I wonder if things are changing though, because you saw last week, Gianni Infantino had an emergency meeting regarding the Club World Cup, which is scheduled for next summer. Where are the sponsors? Where is the TV deal? He's asking, right? There isn't this hunger from corporate global football to jump aboard this tournament because people are thinking it's too much. We're just coming for summer with Copa, right? And the women. And last year was the World Cup. Every summer there's something, right, to fill it. Plus the domestic seasons, plus a freaking home World Cup in 2 years' time. It's
plus marketing budgets, plus sponsorship dollars, all of these things pay. And when you're signing up for some of these things, it's a 2 or 3 year deal. So your money's already enveloped in to be a sponsor. So any of these new things that pop up, that's not more money. It's not like adding a page to a website that just continues and you can keep advertising it on, or a magazine where you have to add 4 new pages every time you do one new page. So it's not like there's a infinity of opportunity with this. These are set budgets. And when you introduce these new tournaments, these new play, you're limiting your market because of what's already been set up. So, you know, and that once again, the trickle down.
I think as well, when you, if we're going to be honest, I think over the last maybe 2 years, how many times collectively have we or friends that love the game have said to one another, that was a terrible match. That was terrible. You seem to be saying it more often than what you used to say. And with more games coming, you're going to be saying it even more than what you are now. So the standard of play is dropping at times.
Is it that, Jimmy, or is it just because we're seeing more matches?
Well, it's just already there. People are complaining about there's too many games, and now you want to add more games.
Well, we see it early seasons, right? We're seeing in the Premier League this year, a lot of the players who played at Euro are not having great starts to this season because they're knackered.
Yeah.
Right. And the games are suffering as a result. And Erling Haaland is benefiting as a result, standing up. Right. So I think we can all agree there's too much football now. And maybe the networks, by not having a deal in place for next year's Club World Cup, maybe it is the network saying, listen, we don't need to do this every single summer. You know, we've got a lot of other rights fees to pay. The monies in international rights fees are just beyond, you know, any kind of reason at this point. What is it? Between 92 and 97 in the Prem, the TV rights went for 200 million a year, around there, right? It's the first 5 years of the league. The new 4-year deal that kicks in next year is going to be over 8 billion. 8 billion. And that's not including all the international markets, which they're saying now that the international Premier League rights will pass over the domestic Premier League rights for the first time. Right, so a lot of money is going into that. There isn't that much money left over for these other little, tournaments they're trying to force into the calendar. So yeah, players get paid a lot of money, but they deserve it. That's I think the rational answer to that, because they're making so much money off these players. I mean, listen, there's financial fair play for a reason, right? Because some clubs do overpay their players, right? But most clubs now at the top flight have their books, I think, in order. And they can afford to pay these players, the top clubs anyway.
Well, and then it goes back to the turnstiles and getting bums in the seats, right? All of a sudden you're like, oh, we need the FA Cup. We need the Carabao Cup. We need the Europa League. We need the Europa League qualifying. I mean, like all of a sudden to pay these giant salaries, it's this big cyclical thing where, hey, if I'm gonna keep Haaland happy, I've got to be in every tournament and he's got to play in everything. So back to Jimmy's Jim Carrey analogy, he is an entertainer, but that means he has to entertain every single time because you're only as good as your last performance when it comes to money, right?
Yeah, he's struggling with that at the moment.
only 2 goals last
movie.
I can't remember.
Yeah, what's Jim
Carrey's
Carrey's
last movie? I don't know.
He's
Are we
an
even
artist now,
dating
right?
ourselves by using that as a reference point?
Probably.
Jim Carrey, probably. Yeah, no,
They're all like, "Who's Jim Carrey?"
He's
He was
doing what
great in The
fuck he
Mask.
wants. There's been a few since then, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think so. Dumb and Dumber 2. Maybe that was the last one. The
Mhm.
No,
dumbest.
he's
Me,
painting
myself,
now.
and Irene.
Was he in that?
Yeah,
Me,
him with
myself,
his 3 black sons,
Remember,
That's
he was
right.
Hank.
Oh, yeah.
Stood
and
this
one
man.
guy was older than him.
That's right.
he is a legend.
He is.
I guess Will Ferrell would be a slightly more modern example to use. Who, by the way, loves his football and is buying into lots of football teams. It seems right now. Even though I'm not sure he's the best leading man in a movie, just saying. But we discussed.
Yeah, you and Will Ferrell have issues.
No, I think he's very funny in a certain role. He's a bit like the Kramer in a role, right? You can't have a show about Kramer, but he's
Oh, I
very
see.
funny.
So you're saying he's the Kramer of comedy?
I think
He's
so. But then
he's a good second or
hilarious.
third man.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's like me on this podcast.
Yeah,
I don't mind like slipping down the scale. That's fine. Let the stars shine.
I
Right?
agree. Look, you and I both. Let the stars shine. Look at Jimmy. He's shining
He's
right now
shining
with
right
all
now.
his
You barely
lighting.
see his face.
It's so
Lilac halo.
Yeah.
I wanted to just
Glowing.
add before we moved on, Sharms, it's also there's a certain responsibility, and maybe that's the wrong word, and that might put a crack in my argument, but about future proofing the game, right? About the legacy piece. And so for certain players like a Jude Bellingham, like a Phil Foden, or on the women's side, you know, you're looking at Lucy Bronze or Keisha Buchanan. You want to make sure that these players are around for a long time, that there's longevity as part of their careers. And this type of cycle that we're in now, where you want more tournaments, you want more games, you're playing for your country, you're playing for your club, and you're playing at a successful place that qualifies for all of these tournaments, and you're playing an like crazy amount of games per year, you're not going to see these players for a decade. You might see them for 6 or 7 years. So that affects the fans as well. And so I don't know what the solution is, but if we want these players to be around for a long time, you want to see the development, you want to see the progression, you want to see the way that they become veterans after being the youthful upstart and the way they shepherd the next generation along. We're going to lose those links because these players, it's just going to be, it's untenable right now. So we're either going to lose them to injury, or they're going to be so mentally shattered that they're going to have to shift and pivot to something else in their lives and to earn a buck.
There's talk about a player strike, right? Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
I don't know how they get them all together, but that's been discussed. Let me ask you, Dubs, when you played, I know there's less money in the game, obviously, but amongst you and your contemporaries, was there a desire to take care of the next generation in your negotiations for, be it CBAs, which is the way you ran the sport? And was that across the board, most people cared about that? Or was it more about, okay, we got to pay the bills right now?
Well, it was obviously just making sure that you're able to pay your rent, you know, because I had to have a job just in addition to the stipend that I was paid, or, you know, the 1 year that I made decent money, which is like maybe 55,000 US when I played that year in WSA. That was the most money I ever made playing football. So yeah, it's obviously taken care of right now. Like, how can I afford to eat so that I can train properly, so that I can perform properly, but also to pay my rent and pay for my gas to get to training. Like, that was the reality. But it was also making sure, as part of that leadership group, that you were setting up the next generation to make sure when they came through, that part of the game for them was more manageable. And you're also seeing it with this current generation, and with Christine Sinclair retiring, but with the Janine Beckys of the world and Quinn, and in front of the Heritage Committee, and making sure like the legacy piece is such a big part of the women's game, because now you're finally getting to a point where they can make decent money. They can make a decent wage and a decent living. And the national team used to be the only way that you could do that because there was no professionalization of the game. And now you're getting to a point where you have that covered on both sides, where, you know, the equitable pay hopefully coming for Canada, the US, that set that benchmark, where the men's team made concessions and there's a pooling of the FIFA prize money where there's still a disparity worldwide. That's there is almost like a safeguard for the women's game to protect it, to make sure that it's sustainable. But on the professional side as well, there's more opportunities than there's ever been. So that legacy piece has always been huge, I think, in the women's game. But I also think, I mean, Craig Forrest, Anthony. The guy behind Forrest there. Jimmy and Forrest.
You can't see Craig for the Forest.
I know. Craig's got a big personality today, so much so that he's Craig and Forrest. I think that's something that's important when you become that veteran player, where you've had to navigate certain things, and you want to make sure it's a safe environment where you can ply your trade. But part of it is kind of getting your due. So I think it's less important in the men's game, but I think it's part of it, where you want to make sure that the next generation is better off than your own, so that it's easier for them to navigate.
Craig, is that the case in the men's? I mean, I just feel like Dubs kind of alluded to this, a little bit different between the women and the men. But when you played professionally, was there any conversation in the room about protecting the legacy for the future, for the next generation of Premier League footballers coming through?
Well, yes. I mean, I remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, every transfer in the Premier League in England, there's a percentage goes to the Professional Footballers Association. And that money is trickled down to the lower divisions. And the Premier League owners wanted to pay less because the fees are becoming way more, and they thought PFA were getting too much money. So the Premier League players voted, and it wasn't unanimous, but it was only like, I think there was every single player in the Premier League except for like 3, David James actually was one of them, that voted against the fact that they would not cut the percentage of transfer fees. And that was the Premier League players that voted for that, thinking of the legacy and what's going on in lower divisions. So that was, I thought, was really impressive of the Premier League players to do that at that time. So yes, there is a legacy piece. Jimmy, was that your experience too?
Yeah, well, I was a part of the PFA as well when I was over there. But I think on the other side with the national team, I remember we had, and Greg, you were there when we had negotiations with them trying to figure out what our pay was going to be. And the discussions actually came up where, you know, we can't afford to give you this because a lot of that money's got to go down and filtered for the youth national team programs.
Yeah.
And we all understood that. We all agreed with it because we all came through the system and we knew how important it was for that money to be filtered down.
Did you feel an obligation when you were negotiating contracts to get as much as you can just to protect those players, like the middle class, the lower class, wherever you were, to protect them as well? Because I know in North American sports, often the union can put pressure on a player. No, don't give a team-friendly deal. That doesn't help us lift the average salary. I mean, Sidney Crosby is the outlier here, right? So Crosby signs a new deal, 8.7, same as his last deal. He's worth so much more than that, was worth more than that, but he's a bit superstitious. He's doing it for the game to win now. But I bet the union hate that because it brings down the average a little bit, even if it's a little bit in the comparables. Did you ever feel that pressure?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No, never. I think, you know, Sidney Crosby's a special case as well, though. I mean, he's looking at it. He wants to win championships or Stanley Cup, and he's taken less salary because he wants that money filtered around the dressing room so that they can bring in better players to have a great team rather than him taking all the money. But when I was,
I'm not sure Sharms knows how averages work either. If you add that all up and other players have made more, and Sydney's come down.
I was always confused.
Total's the same.
But the mean and the medium are different, though. Medium.
Let's go through that.
In the middle of the road.
Sorry, Jimmy, to interrupt. I just had to
And-
clarify that.
And there's the mediums, and there's predicting what's going to happen next versus
That's
the
been a
medium.
medium for a long time,
Mm.
unfortunately. Sorry, Jimmy. Go ahead.
No, I was done.
But you, Craig, ever feel that pressure? I mean, was it when you knew someone was up for a new deal in the room? Would you, even though you knew that, let's just say Pal Di Canio, if he took less money, it would help the team. You could, perhaps build elsewhere. Did you still back your teammate? No, get what you can when you can.
Well, there's a difference when you have a cap too.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, we saw that. We've seen it in the NFL with Tom Brady taking less so he could have a better offensive line to be able to give more time with the ball. So,
It's
but
self-preservation, though.
yeah, there's no salary cap and in the Premier League or in football in general.
No, it's run like baseball, right? If you're going to do two leagues that have that same, hey, we just throw money around and it's in that space, right? Because everybody else, even the NBA, even though they don't have a cap, they have a luxury tax, right? So you're giving money back. And I don't think the Prem nor MLB have that. So
Well,
it changes how athletes
rules,
What
right?
do you mean?
In the Prem, there's financial fair play rules. Like you can't just spend what you want. You got to justify it.
Yeah, I still don't understand your financial fair play. I know it's supposed to be keeping teams in a fair space, but it doesn't seem to work. Number one, and not everyone seems to be breaking it on every
Explain
weekend.
FFP to Longer.
I think Longer would understand it more if it's called its new name, right?
Yeah, sorry.
The new nomenclature of
Which is what,
profitability and
P- what's it called?
sustainability.
That's thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what they call it now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a real
So
thing. They
basically,
did
you could
like an
justify it with-
acronym name change.
Yes.
Yeah, they've kind of shifted to that. So
Yeah,
it's about the health of the league and like staying within kind of these targets and making sure that certain teams aren't paying too much, but that you want the club and therefore the league to be sustainable and to survive. So you're making sure that you're not, your losses aren't too great, but then you're also not overspending, that everybody's sort of kept in between these two kind of points, right?
So it's a forced transparency, supposedly, from the league to the clubs, and hey, you have to show us your books basically every year.
Well, look at Man City right now. They're in court right now.
No, I understand. They've been getting away. Sorry, Jimmy.
What they do is it's to protect the owners from overspending, because these guys that have an awful lot, men and women that have an awful lot of money, egos get in the way, and it's, well, if you're spending that, I'm going to spend this, and then they try to outdo each other, and then they overspend, and then before you know it, they want to get rid of it because nobody wants to lose money. And that way, when you do have the salary caps and certain rules that you can implement into the league, it protects the owners from overspending, and it gives parity as well.
Or
Almost protects them from themselves.
Absolutely, it does.
Or it protects other owners that aren't oil states that have other reasons for spending the money and can spend as much as they want because making money isn't what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yes, they dismiss that benefactor type ownership structure, right? Guy comes in with oil money and it's his plaything. Or in the case of, City, some of these clubs, it's that sport washing, which discussed before, right? Is to cleanse their image, right? And there's no dollar amount to that because it's so worthwhile, right?